Hey, everyone. Um, Glad to see you here tonight. My name is Roanne Tasoulis, and I am the director of the Monadnock Farm and Community Coalition. It is a organization with over 140 members who come together regularly to cultivate projects that are supportive of a dynamic, robust local food system in the Monadnock region of New Hampshire. Um, Hopefully you had a chance to see the film that we are talking about tonight with a couple of great panelists from the film and the project that created the film, Farm Free or Die, which was a production of the American Resiliency Project, whose mission is to harness the power of strategic narratives, obviously through film, to address our greatest threats to human security and civilizational stability, from transforming the electric grid and adapting to sea level rise, strengthening food security and increasing civic engagement. American Resiliency Project's work is used to educate, organize, and mobilize diverse audiences. As you know, Farm Free or Die speaks very eloquently to transformative agricultural policies that might improve farming livelihoods and open market opportunities for carbon sequestration and removal. Lots of words in there. Let's see, there's no one here quite yet, but I'm going to go ahead and plug the other two films that are part of the Monadnock Earth Day Film Festival. Tomorrow night, we're showing Growing with the Grain, Hope on the Hudson, which is, the content is about scientists, growers, and bakers who are involved in a grain trial test in the Hudson River Valley. The conversation is going to be around the Northeast Grain Shed Alliance, a couple of members who will be joining us for that, as well as one of the producers of the film from Hudson Valley Food Hub. On Friday at 6:30, Melinda Mosier of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation will be facilitating a conversation with two BIPOC female farmers around films that are found in the short documentary Farmer C, which highlights the work of Clarinda C. Stanley of Green Heffa Farms, which is a tea company and natural health brand and educational resource on 14 acres in Liberty, North Carolina. Keanu Farrow, who is a farmer, and Hari Maya Adkahari, is also a farmer from Fresh Start Farms, will be joining her for that conversation. Registration for these films can be found in the chat. And I have to thank our main sponsors, CNS Wholesale Grocers, Prime Roast, Tasoulis Realty, Farm to Community Supporters, which are Fresh Frisky Cow Gelato, Yankee Farm Credit, WS Badger, Savings Bank of Walpole, True North Networks, and our partners in the film and festival, Monadnock Food Co-op and the Monadnock International Film Festival, as well as tonight's sponsor, Food Connects, and our local food fighters, Monadnock Conservancy, Stonewall Farm, Archway Farm, and the Hungry Diner. I'd like to introduce Lara Corbino of Food Connects, who is going to be the MC for our conversation tonight. She is the marketing outreach manager at Food Connects, which is an entrepreneur nonprofit that runs a farm to school program and food hub in Brattleboro, Vermont. She has an MS in sustainable food systems from Green Mountain College. So of course, she's extremely interested in food systems education, strengthening local food systems, and was honored as a 2021 trendsetter by the Business Journal for her work. And apparently she's very active in the acting part of life around the Monadnock region. So thank you, Laura, and thank you, our panelists.
Thank you very much, Roanne. I will be introducing our panelists today, but thank everyone for joining us for this film. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Our first panelist is Nicole Lederer. Nicole is the chair and co-founder of the Environmental Entrepreneurs, or E2, an advocacy and communications platform for business leaders to advance strong environmental policy to grow the economy. Nicole works with E2's pro-environment business members to establish strategic collaboration between businesses, military, agriculture, and environmental leaders, and engage with legislators at the state and national levels. E2 promotes policies to foster sustainable climate, energy, transportation, water, land use, and agricultural practices and technologies that advance a clean economy. E2 supports and partners exclusively with NRDC, for which Nicole serves as a trustee. Nicole also sits on the board of the American Resilience Project, which brings me to Johanna Evans. She is the managing director at the American Resilience Project. After graduating from Dartmouth in 2010 and earning a master's in literature and social justice from Lehigh University, she returned to Dartmouth in 2012 to curate and manage the film program at the Hopkins Center for the Arts for nearly 10 years. In 2021, she joined the American Resilience Project as a team as the managing director, helping to leverage the power of film to advance environmental justice and take the organization's work to the next level. She lives in Lebanon, New Hampshire, where she has served as a campaign manager for state Senate candidates and is an active volunteer. So thank you both so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
So I'm very interested in the American Resilience Project and was wondering if we could just get a little bit more information about the organization and maybe why the organization as a whole was really inspired to make this film.
Well, I will let Nicole definitely take the question of the inspiration for the film, since she, as a co-writer and a co-producer on the film, has been there from start to finish. But I'll start with just a quick overview of our organization. We make short documentaries, usually between 20 and 30 minutes, with an eye on getting decision makers in the room to find common ground, to find common sense solutions on these issues, and to advance policies that are going to make us more resilient against the threats of climate change and other threats. So we mostly focus on qualitative screenings, getting these key audiences together, but we also are really interested in educating the public. So as you saw from the film, we are trying to reach a variety of different audiences. With this film, everything from legislators to voters to farmers and businesses who have an equal stake in different parts of our agriculture system. So we're now starting to shift to a more nimble model. You can keep your eye out on our social media channels and on our website for some follow-up films related to Farm for Your Die that are short micro documentaries to keep up with changes as we look towards the 2023 Farm Bill. We're trying to stay as current as possible. Now it seems more than ever, the conversation around environmental legislation is moving at a much faster rate than it used to, thank goodness. But it means that we've got a lot more work to do to keep up and to keep crafting those strategic narratives that are going to cut through the noise and help people from different partisan backgrounds see that they all have a stake in this. But Nicole, please tell them where the idea for the film came from.
Thanks, Johanna. And I want to start by saying that the American Resilience Project has made a number of films that address the climate crisis from different perspectives. I was first drawn to work with the filmmaker Roger Sorkin when he was producing a film called The Burden, which you can find online, and which looked at the Department of Defense's attempts to both define and reduce its risks as related to its fossil fuel dependence. And it's an excellent film. At the time, on behalf of E2, I was working in a similar area, and that's how Roger and I first met. And since then, he's made several other films that look at climate change through a variety of different lenses. But I came to Roger in the course of working up to the 2018 Farm Bill. My organization helped to lead a coalition of business, environment, and agriculture groups to first write and later pass a provision in the 2018 Farm Bill called the Soil Health Demonstration Trial for the purpose of connecting the potential of agriculture not only to reduce its contributions to climate change, reduce the emissions associated with food, fiber, and fuel production, but I think more compellingly, to actually remove atmospheric carbon and store it in the soil. So the Soil Health Demonstration Trial highlighted the ability of agriculture to be a climate solution while bolstering farmer revenue and improving the overall economic security of rural America. So I suggested that this might be something worth looking at, and Roger proceeded through a good deal of outreach, some to people in farm communities around the country that I knew and others that I didn't. Got a fantastic sample of farmers that have changed their value proposition through regenerative agriculture and are specifically interested in looking at the climate benefits that they're producing as a possibility of a new agricultural commodity. And I think he did an amazing job, particularly during the pandemic, which we can talk about a little bit more. I think Johanna would be great at talking about what were the challenges and what turned out to be the advantages of operating under those circumstances.
Well, just to answer that quickly, one of the, blessings in disguise of working in the pandemic is you realize you don't have to fly everywhere to do all the filming yourself. Roger actually got really creative during the pandemic with hiring crews remotely, directing via Zoom, and cutting down our carbon footprint as filmmakers, which now that we are in the habit of doing that, it's hard to imagine going back to a world where we had to fly everywhere for every shot we wanted. So a lot of the footage as the film was in development and we realized like, oh, we really should have gotten a comment from this person about a specific topic, rather than having to go fly back out there, we can just tell the person, hey, camera crew's going to be there on Thursday. Do you have half an hour? So, so it's been really great flexing those creative muscles, and I think it's giving us a path forward to be more sustainable ourselves.
I want to just add to that I think one of the greatest things about this film is that it features exclusively farmers' voices. And those farmers were, because of the system that Johanna and Roger had to follow, they were interviewed by their friends and family. And I really think that we wound up with a film that feels very farmer generated. And I think that's a big advantage.
I think that is just incredibly fascinating as someone who knows a little bit about film, being able to reduce your carbon footprint because of the pandemic, sort of, or in spite of it, is quite amazing. There's always those silver linings that we're finding, and that seems to be one of them. We do have a question from our audience, so it's a two-parter. So the first part of the question is, how has this film been received by policymakers? We know that a lot of the film is focused on a call to action in terms of policy. And can you tell us how it has affected the conversation with policymakers, especially in the Midwest?
So I'll answer a little bit about the impact campaign and what we're working on now and where we're seeing traction. But then I want to turn it over to Nicole to talk a little bit about her sense of the strategy of what our goal actually is. I can say that the film launched in February, and we have been organizing festival screenings and some screenings with other think tanks and nonprofits that are working in this space. And we are in the process of trying to nail down some outdoor screenings on farms in the Midwest. That our hope is to bring those legislators on the ground to experience the film, but then also to see with their own eyes what's taking place. So we're trying to hammer home that message with sort of this compound experience. In terms of how it's being received and the conversations that these policy makers are having, or where they see this fitting in, we're working with a few legislators down in Georgia, actually, who are really invested in agriculture in their own state and are really interested in how they can make this more affordable for farmers, how they can revitalize their communities based on making farms more profitable. So we actually are getting a great response across different partisan divides. So that's going well. But yes, we're expecting the screening campaign to start ramping up over the summer and throughout 2023 as we start working towards the Farm Bill. But Nicole, specific goals you have or hopes for our legislative agenda?
So just to describe the timing, the Farm Bill, for those who don't know, and I think your audience probably knows very well, is an every 5-year bill. So the next one will be passed, if it was anything like the 2018 bill, at the very end of 2023. So that is our time frame within which to affect the distribution of many billions of dollars that will determine who grows what, where, and when, and how. And our goal is to take advantage of a very strong USDA interest right now in the potential of regenerative ag and its many associated benefits for the environment, for farmers, for the economy. Take advantage of that commitment and interest at USDA to do everything we can to highlight the benefits to the farm community, to those legislators, to those rural legislators, and in particular, those rural legislators that sit on the Senate and House agriculture committees, but not exclusively, and to be sure that there is a bit, if you think of the Farm Bill and the money that flows from it as a river, we're looking to rechannel the river such that it is inclusive of new policies that particularly incentivize those practices that build soil health through practices that reduce the amount of soil nutrient depletion and increase soil fertility. That one primary and central component of soil fertility is the carbon content. So these practices in general increase the amount of carbon that's removed from the atmosphere and stored in the roots of plants and ultimately stored in the soil. And those practices, which include no-till or low-till, cover crops, crop rotation, compost, and a few other practices that are particularly effective. Those practices, in some cases, are actually discouraged by current Farm Bill policy, and we are looking to flip those and invest and help farmers, incentivize farmers to adopt practices which could very well seem at the outset to be risky, because any kind of change in your practices can present risk, and farmers aren't generally operating on a huge cushion of safety around their risk profile. So Farm Bill needs to support and incentivize those practices, and it also needs to invest in the technologies that will help farmers to measure and quantify the amount of carbon that they have increased in their soil by pulling it from the atmosphere. The reason that's important is that in addition to improving their soil fertility, in addition to lowering the costs of inputs from fertilizer to pesticide to water, for that matter, which of course is a big input in the western half of the United States. In addition to increasing biodiversity and decreasing water pollution and decreasing air pollution, So in addition to all of, and increasing fertility and productivity over a period of time, the component of all those advantages to regenerative ag that is not yet reliably measured is the climate mitigation benefit, the reduction of greenhouse gas from the atmosphere, and the deposit of that greenhouse gas in the soil. Once that can be measured, it can be monetized. And the monetization is not the problem. If you read the many journals that look at where venture investment and innovation is taking place, there's a huge amount of innovation and investment taking place in the arena of soil monitoring, whether it is soil sampling directly, aerial through drone or satellite, and a host of other new technologies to measure soil content and components. Those technologies are evolving, and the reason they are important is they allow for farmers to deliver a new product to the market. And there are a lot of consumers for that product. Right now, enormous companies looking to I'm going to use the word offset, even though it creates a lot of images, particularly in the minds of those who are concerned that carbon offsets, as they've been defined in the past, have allowed for ongoing emissions, industrial emissions. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking, has to do with whether or not pollutants are emitted. What we're talking about here is reducing past emissions. These companies are looking to compensate for past pollution that has resulted from their operations. And by contracting with farmers to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, they can become carbon neutral or carbon negative over time. And there is a strong demand for that. So the fact that farmers can sell that is a huge incentive for farmers. The ability to measure and certify that product is what's standing between them and full monetization of that product.
Thank you. That was a very good explanation. It sort of covered one of my other questions I was going to ask later. So we do have another question from the audience, which is great. So it's sort of addressing the Farm Bill and policymakers again in this, so sort of on the same thread. And they're wondering if you would discuss any changes that are being proposed to the 2023 Farm Bill, specifically around revising subsidies for farmers that would include fruits and vegetables with maybe less emphasis on corn and other grains. And they also wanted to put out a little thank you and say it was a great film.
Johanna, would you like me to start on that one?
Yeah, why don't you start? I've got a couple other comments, but I think it's mostly for you, Nicole.
Well, let me start by saying that I am not a Farm Bill expert. And so the parts that apply to Midwestern commodity crops versus specialty crops, that is not something that I can comment on in depth. What I do know is that the soil health demonstration trial, which was allocated something between $10 and $25 million per year to be allocated via a grant system, went as much to almond orchards in California as it did to corn in the Midwest. So the objective there was to get a strong picture of what carbon removal looks like in different cropping systems. So I do want to say that there was a democratic attitude brought to bear there. It wasn't being driven by any particular crop advocacy organization. And as to what are the changes that can come about, I'll just make reference to a couple. And I'd like to refer your audience to the report that's in the chat, which E2 generated shortly after the 2018 Farm Bill, that lists the types of policy amendments in the Farm Bill and at the state level that we should be working toward to amplify regenerative ag. But for example, and this is a really interesting area, farmers know far better than I that a lot of the funds that are disseminated by the Farm Bill have to do with insurance, crop insurance for crop loss. The price of insurance is a big determining factor in economic outcomes for farmers. One of the changes that could really incentivize regenerative ag would be to recognize the risk reduction that accompanies regenerative practices, which have been shown to reduce the risk of crop loss. One of the reasons for this is that extreme weather presents, I think farmers generally know, and many farmers have been hugely negatively impacted by, let's face it, freak weather over and over again, repeatedly and increasingly. Regenerative practices tend to buffer crops against those freak weather events, whether those events are drought or flooding. And, I don't know about tornadoes. I don't know if better rooted plants survive better under those circumstances, but certainly when it comes to water, or the erosion that accompanies flooding, et cetera. So by recognizing the risk reduction associated with regenerative practices, the USDA could lower the cost of crop insurance for those crops. And that would be a great incentive. Another type of incentive would be to recognize the benefits of cover cropping and, if not actually incentivize them, not discourage them, as sometimes happens under the current Farm Bill, by actually considering by counting cover crops as an additional risk. So farmers have been discouraged from cover cropping because of crop insurance prices. That should change. And those are just two examples, besides direct investment in helping farmers to transition to regenerative ag practices.
So just to tag on to this, we've gotten a slightly different version of this question at previous screenings. A lot of folks who see the film come away wondering whether the kind of work we're trying to do for the Farm Bill is going to benefit small farmers as much as it's going to benefit like large corporate farms. And especially thinking about these carbon markets that are being developed, is this the kind of thing that small farmers are also going to get access to, have a voice in shaping, et cetera? Or is this going to be another corporate thing that is going to leave small farmers behind? And all I can say is, yes, we've got our eye on that problem. You can stay tuned for follow-up films about how this relates to small farmers specifically, and also how this relates to BIPOC farmers, folks in marginalized communities, how this relates to, getting better food on the table of folks living in the cities. Like, these are all follow-up issues that we hope to explore in microdocs related to the film.
Yeah, that was a question I was thinking about in the film. There was specifically one of the farmers said something along the lines of, the Farm Bill is not a one size fit all for farmers right now. And you did highlight a family that was on a smaller farm, and the woman indicated that if she had more land, she would want to be farming it with other people. So it's really great to think, especially in our neck of the woods here in New Hampshire, we have a lot of smaller farmers, especially compared to the Midwest. And so that is very poignant for a lot of our farmers who really do care about the environment and making sure that they're leaving the land a better place than what they, have received. So switching gears a little bit around farmers, we're talking about a lot of, Nicole, you mentioned that there's a lot of risks in farming, and we know that with the climate change and all the the challenges economically with farming, as the film highlighted. And so in some ways, you know, it seems externally that switching to regenerative agriculture seems like a no-brainer. So what are some of the challenges that are specifically holding farmers back from being able to do that, to take that leap, to make their farms, you know, sequestering carbon and to make the planet a healthier place?
Well, I can only quote what some of the farmers in the film and what some of the other farmers that I've worked with say, because I'm not a farmer. I'm a policy advocate, and in particular, a climate policy advocate. So I want it to be clear that, and in particular, a business based policy advocate. There are costs associated with changing practices. There are costs associated, for example, with no-till planting. It requires new equipment. There are costs associated with cover crop seeds, significant costs. And there are risks in changing any of your practices. There are also risks that your yield will go down temporarily while you're in the transition process. And none of these are costs that farmers operating on a small profit margin can assume. There has to be policy in place to incentivize and support farmers in the transition. And heaven knows there's a lot of money flowing out of the federal government and state government to foster practices, particular cultivation practices in the states and from the federal government. So the question is, can we direct some of that funding to support farmers to make this transition? Once they do, the farmers that speak on the film and the ones that I've spoken to about this feel enormously emancipated from the kinds of costs that they right now can't escape, ever increasing, and now especially very steeply increasing costs in fertilizer, pesticide, and other inputs.
Thank you. There's a more carbon sequestration focused question here from the audience that we just received. So understanding that the film focus is on sustainable agriculture and upcoming legislation, has there been any discussion of how carbon sequestration relates to the forestry industry? Sorry, that was a little bit hard to say.
So the soil health demonstration trial is written in such a way as to be applicable not only to agriculture in terms of, you know, to row crops and food production, but also to forestry and to rangeland. I believe it's been primarily applied to food production, and I'm not sure if cotton's been in there or not. I haven't looked recently. It's now in its third year of deployment. But yes, there is a great deal of attention being paid to the potential of trees to sequester carbon. In fact, that's pretty much the easiest of the calculations to make in terms of natural systems, because trees last a long time, and the math is already determined. And yes, trees sequester carbon. Rangeland as well. Disturbed rangeland versus undisturbed, the way one grazes rangeland, all that, there's enormous potential for carbon sequestration. So I would look at this as a bucket and call it natural systems carbon removal. And so forest and rangeland are included. I have to drop off, so I'd like to make one comment before I do. For anyone who watches this program, all of you New Hampshire farmers, don't forget how much influence you have over the federal farm bill. I can't speak to your state policies because I don't know them, but your representative, Annie Custer, is on the House Agriculture Committee, and she needs to hear from you that you want to see these changes in the Farm Bill. She needs to hear from you that you want her to fight for these changes in the Farm Bill, that they will be good for the New Hampshire farmer, that you want these options, that these provisions in the 2023 Farm Bill would provide to you. No one is more influential on this topic than New Hampshire farmers with the New Hampshire delegation. You can easily reach out to her by looking for her office website. I did myself. You can contact her by email. You can contact her office by phone. If you think that none of those things matter, you're wrong. Her staff will tabulate who called or emailed and on what topic. And you can really have an impact on just how much your representatives stand up for this issue. Both Representative Custer, who sits on the Ag Committee, and your other representatives, both House and Senate, whether they're on the committee or not. If this is an important issue to you, you should stand up on this one. I also encourage you to look at the website for environmental entrepreneurs. It's at e2.org. If you would like to join our advocacy efforts and our ability to organize farmers such as yourself in advocacy work, we'd be delighted to hear from you. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry, I have a granddaughter who is waiting for me in the kitchen and I need to go.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole.
Bye-bye.
Hi. And Johanna, my last question actually was on the call to action and what can we do? And so Nicole highlighted some of that, but is there anything else that you wanted to share as, New Hampshire residents that we can do to help, transition farmers to regenerative agriculture?
So as a fellow New Hampshire resident, I'm happy to field this question. What I would say is we are open to everyone and anyone organizing screenings of their own, whether it's with your church, whether it's with your kid's school, whether it's, at your local community center. Feel free to help us spread the word about this and to try to build a coalition of support. We'll all call Annie. It's going to be great. She's going to hear from so many happy, excited people about the possibilities of carbon sequestration and how this can help with both the local, helping our farmers and the larger climate crisis. So you can organize a screening. We also, on our website, you can go to amres.org/farm-free-or-die, and you can find a discussion toolkit. So if you want to organize one of these screenings, or if you just want to have a cup of coffee with a farmer friend and say, hey, what do you think about this? We have a discussion guide to help point you in the right direction. We also have a copy of the E2 study that Nicole mentioned and some other resources. So that's step one. Step two, one of the things that we're really interested in is thinking about how consumers may change their behavior to take regenerative agriculture and basically, like when you go to the grocery store and you see that some things are certified organic and you know what that means. We're in the process of trying to figure out whether consumers in their spending choices, trying to identify farms that they know are using these regenerative ag practices, whether we can help move the needle just in our spending habits alone. At the moment, you're not going to find a sticker on your local green pepper that says, this reduced the carbon footprint of the farm by X amount. That's coming. That's one of the things we're hoping that's going to come out of this farm bill, is a way to measure it so that the consumer knows, what their local farms are doing. But one of the nice things about living in New Hampshire is, unlike other states, we do have a lot of access to locally grown produce. Our farmers are our neighbors, and you can ask them. You can just ask them what they're doing. Are they using cover crops? That's another thing you can do. So you can be a good citizen, you can be a good consumer, and you can be an organizer. And I hope you will you will find time to do one or all those things in the next year as we ramp up for the 2023 Farm Bill.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again. Roanne, can I toss it over to you?
Sure. I just want to thank you for showing up tonight and spending some time with us. This recording will be available on the Monadnock Farm Community Coalition website. I'm sure it will be elsewhere with other people who are here tonight. There was so much rich information that I had a hard time keeping up with it in my notes. So I know for one, I will be watching it again. And I definitely think we will bring this back next year before the Farm Bill, you know, when it gets into the heated piece of the Farm Bill, and keep a spotlight on this. And I love the idea of, you know, stickers at some point in the future. We're in the middle of creating the Monadnock grown sticker. And I could see it being a different color if we're talking about regenerative agriculture, if we're talking about organic, but you know, I get ahead of myself. So thank you so much for coming tonight in the audience. Thank you so much for our panelists. Nicole Lederer from Environmental Entrepreneurs, unbelievable, just a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. Exactly, and Johanna Evans, thank you for stepping in for Roger Sorkin. And Laura from Food Connects, you rocked as usual. I just want to do a plug for tomorrow night's film, Growing with the Grain. We have an amazing panel. And the discussion is going to be around, you know, what is the grain shed movement in the Northeast and how can the Monadnock region become a part of that? And then on Friday, again, it's at 6:30, the next two nights, we'll be having yet another incredible, evocative conversation with two female BIPOC farmers who are, one's a farmer at Susu Community Farm in Brattleboro, Vermont, and the other one is part of Fresh Start Farms in Manchester, New Hampshire. So I'm so excited. Thank you. I know for one, my action is that I have a whole family that votes differently from me, and I am absolutely going to send them a link to the Vimeo for Farm Free or Die, which is available on the American Resiliency Project website. So there's not a lot of argument to be left when you look and you hear from farmers about how this could work in favor for them, for their viability moving forward. So I think that's enough out of me. Thank you, Dee Fitzgerald from the Monadnock International Film Festival for running this, and we'll see you tomorrow night, I hope.
Thanks so much, everyone.